Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Agency Side podcast. I'm your host, Justin Levinson. And today I'm joined by Nick Cowling. Nick is the CEO of Citizen, a leader who's helping redefine what public relations looks like in an era where brand's reputation is everything. With 3 decades of experience guiding teams and businesses to global success, he brings a tomorrow first philosophy that blends public relations with performance, data, and intelligence, giving clients the clarity, confidence, and courage they need to stay visible and competitive in a fast changing world. Nick, it's so great to be with you today.
Oh, it's great to be here, Justin. Appreciate it.
And are you in Toronto? Is that where you're located?
I'm in Toronto today. Yeah.
Awesome. I love Toronto. I've been there a handful of times as a touring musician, and I've been there for the North by Northeast Music Festival, which I've really enjoyed being in your city. It's a lovely place.
Great. Yeah. It's really cold today. So maybe not best day to visit, but
Well, it's wonderful having you today. Just to get into it, maybe you can just, for someone who might not be familiar with Citizen, just kind of describe to us what you guys are doing.
sure. We're an international, I'd call us a mid-sized international PR agency. So based with offices across Canada, the US, and the UK. We probably most of our business or most of our work that people might be familiar with is more obviously on the consumer marketing end of PR, but we do quite a bit of corporate reputation work as well. So we work across industries. So whether it's transportation, food and beverage, CPG, travel and tourism, and the like.
Cool. And I'm interested in your personal journey. How did you kind of get started in this particular space?
It's interesting. When I first went to college, I had no idea really what I wanted to do. So I just took business admin. I was drawn to the marketing part of school, even though I'm pretty good at math. Accounting was my least favorite. And I remember I met someone who did public relations for the school that I was going to, and I had a coffee with her. And as she was telling me what she was doing, I was like, that sounds a lot like what I really want to do. So I looked into it a little bit further. Of course, at the same college, they happen to have a PR course. It was one of only two in the country at the time. So I switched programs the following year, and then I landed at my first agency right out of school.
Well, what was your first role in a PR agency?
I was an account coordinator in the advanced technology group at Hill and Knowlton, which I
Interesting.
was working on. Was it Microsoft Maps and stuff from 30 years ago. Tech was not very tech then, but
Yeah.
it was new at the time.
Yeah, that's super cool. And so from account manager, what was sort of like the next promotion? Just kind of curious in your background.
Well, I stayed there for a couple of years, and as people do on the agency side, after a couple of years, I switched. I actually went to a smaller agency to see if that was a better fit for me. I loved the experience, but I was a little bored, to be honest. I just didn't have enough work. But that actually allowed me to engage. Like I was spending a lot of face-to-face time with journalists, meeting different stakeholder groups, in what I'll call my free time, my non-billable time. And that led to actually Edelman, who's I think still the largest in the world at the time, had recently acquired an agency in Canada and was building up. They reached out to me because they were looking for someone who was good at media relations. And my name kept coming up when they asked media about it. So I went over there, which was a great experience. I was there for 5.5 years. And then I got poached by one of my clients at the Home Depot. So I went in-house, and it was eye-opening, absolutely eye-opening in so many ways. And when I first got there, I loved it because it was just really, I wouldn't call it Wild West, but it's like everyone did what was best for the company. Like you never heard the words, "That's not my job." But towards the end of my sort of 5 to 6 years, I went from it became very bureaucratic. And I mean, I went from having to get approval on things like from 2 or 3 people to 13. So I couldn't get anything done. And when I told my president, I was like, I'm going to start looking. And the only thing that was holding me there was her. She was my best mentor ever. She understood, and she mentioned it to a couple of people. And one of them, my boss today, said, "Hey, Annette said you might be looking. Would you consider coming back to agency?" And I hadn't thought about it, but the rest is history. I've been here for 18 years now. That's when I landed at Citizen.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, it's quite the journey. What sort of is your day to day now? What's a CEO? What does your job look like?
Well, you know what? It's got some things that I just absolutely love about it. And then I say there's some things I miss. So my day-to-day now is really about kind of providing a vision and direction for the agency. So I'm very much, I don't know if you're into Enneagrams, but I'm a 7. So I'm often thinking about what's next. And my personality, if you will, is to say like, how can we push this further? How can we do things better? What else should we be considering? And so I spend a lot of time about that. That provides me with a lot of energy. But I don't work with clients nearly as much. Like I might be brought in if there's a serious crisis or sort of a senior level client meeting that requires me. Maybe a pitch, but it's 10% of my time these days. I definitely miss that. I miss that. And I miss working with the day-to-day teams because I think one of my favorite things about agency is actually watching, young talent develop and helping them figure out the next skill that they're going to acquire and, how they'll continue to progress. But as I said, I can't do everything. So I'm very happy to kind of work through my team, my executive team to, again, continue to engage and build on the agency and then coach them to be doing what they should be with their teams.
Yeah. I imagine that this industry has changed a lot since you first got into it as an account manager a while back. What does it look like now in comparison to how it looked before when you got into the industry?
My first day at Hill Knowlton, I spent 8 hours pretty much standing at a fax machine, sending press releases to a newsroom, and then
What's a
calling
fax
them,
machine? What's a fax machine?
and then calling them to make sure they got my fax. Even at the time, usually like newsrooms had one computer in the middle that could receive email. So even though as agency we had email, it wasn't a reliable communication source because often those things would get missed. Fast forward to probably 2007, 2008, sort of the birth, if you will, when social was starting to become mainstream. So shift then. And probably continual evolution. Like I think the adoption curve of just technology as a whole, the fragmentation of media, the unfortunate, I'll say, business model that traditional media had, sort of bringing on their quasi demise, had really shifted the form of public relations. Now, a lot of people, let's say outside of the discipline, would often say that public relations kind of equals media relations, but it's not quite true. PR's in some ways misunderstood as, agencies like Citizen are telling our clients what to say. But PR is much more about helping companies act in the way that they should so that they're getting to the right audience, that they're connecting on the right messages, that they're, even if it's about promoting products and services, it's doing it in a way that's going to actually engage with the right audience, right? A constituency that needs the product or service is going to engage them in the right way and allow them to create conversation about it rather than just hearing about it, sort of that one-way communication. So now, fast forward to today, AI having such an impact on so many different disciplines in marketing. Believe it or not, it's probably the best thing that's happened to PR in a decade or more. Because AI, the LLMs are looking for the most trusted, authoritative content available on the internet, and that's what we generate. I think I saw some rough numbers to suggest that I think like they will pull 10% of their content from social, roughly 30% from owned, and the rest of it is coming from, again, that authoritative, which tends to be institutions, academic, and media, right? Trusted media. So it's having a massive impact in the sense of what we're able to do, and at the same time allowing us to measure some true value for our clients. So,
Yeah, that's interesting. And you guys have a very unique offering too, because you guys aren't just a traditional PR agency. You're actually doing influencer marketing and experiential. You're almost like a creative agency and a PR agency. I'd be interested to learn more about that and if I'm actually describing that correctly.
Thanks for tuning in, folks. This episode is brought to you by Coming Up Creative, a relationship-first boutique creative recruitment agency. We disrupt the creative ecosystem by running sophisticated, multi-channel campaigns with custom video and voice outreach that actually gets responses. We actively market the agencies and brands we represent to help them stand out to today's industry's top talent, all backed by real human connection and AI-powered targeting. If you're ready for a modern recruitment approach, visit www.comingupllc.com and get started today.
No, you're absolutely right. So Citizen's part of I'll call it a network. I wouldn't quite call it a holding company, but a network of other agencies. So all the disciplines, media buying, advertising, promotion, and such are a part of the network. And I mentioned I'm a 7. So when I take a look around at some of these other disciplines, I'm like, I think the strategic planning is really critical when I look at a creative agency, as well as the creative teams. But I wonder, how can we apply that to our discipline, right? So I'm not looking to be a creative agency, but I do want to provide really great insights to drive our work. And from a creative standpoint, I want to create what we would call sort of more earn first creative, which I feel is what a lot of creative agencies are now trying to build themselves to create, because our job is to put something into the world, again, that's going to, I'll say broadly, be newsworthy, but generate that conversation, right? We want the right audiences to be talking about our clients rather than just hearing from our clients. And so, we brought in strat planning probably in 2015, 2016. And then we were at that time, we were kind of renting creative teams from our sister agencies, just to try and figure out what's the right type of creative agents or creative team and that's going to fit with our business. How do we brief them properly to kind of get the stuff that we're looking for? It was funny. I remember hearing it from a team probably 3 or 4 years after we started. And they said, what? I love doing some stuff with Citizen. I was like, no, why? Because you do all of the back of the deck stuff. And I was like, back of the deck? What do you mean? They're like, we present to our advertising clients and we have to go through all the, here's everything, and then the radio and the outdoor and what it'll look like in print and on TV and blah, blah, blah. And then we have these cool, wicked ideas in the back of the deck and we never get to them. But you guys only present back of the deck. So I was like, oh, I like that. I like that a lot. And then we brought on XM. It was a natural evolution. I mean, we were doing a number of, I'll call them events, right, as opposed to experiences at the time. And so that was a quick add-on. But as we got better at it, we realized hey, you know what? There's a lot of opportunity and experience. Of course, that creates a lot of news value of, even at the time, I mean, social was still in its infancy, but there was still the idea that obviously people were sharing content. And the way they were doing that most was when they had something they felt was unique, they wanted to share with their circle. So we started to build on that. And then we got into, I'll call it more of a technology and intelligence, probably in 2020, end of 2020, when, data was really starting to be something of value to PR. It's long been a very tough thing. Well, I want to say it's tough. It's long been a discipline that's been cost prohibitive to measure, because couldn't take credit for what some other marketing disciplines were already taking credit for. And so we are kind of stuck in these vanity metrics, impressions, engagement, that sort of stuff. But that changed in 2019, 2020, as data became more readily available. And so we started to build an intelligence team that today, I mean, some of the stuff now we're talking about connecting to commercial metrics, employee advocacy, brand health, risk evaluation. It's changed the game, if you ask me.
Wow. And that stuff you can present to your clients and they can have full transparency and see how things are.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So now having full broad spectrum of those capabilities, we bring them to bear, not again to be a digital agency or a research company or a creative agency, but to be, quite frankly, just a better, badass PR agency.
Yeah. So you mentioned kind of the strategy department. I'd be curious to just kind of know what other kind of roles and positions are within the whole agency itself.
Well, as I said, outside of, we have the PR, which tends to also, in our business, tends to largely be the client service group as well. So that's kind of one area I think PR and creative agencies differ, is those are very separate. you don't have experts and client service as the same person, but we do. We would have, again, the creative teams, as you would know it, strategic planning group. Our digital team is everything from creative technologists through to, we call them decision engineers, but they are the guys who could do stuff. They can post on social. They can, create some low code or no code websites or that sort of thing. And then intelligence group, largely they are data analysts. We used to have more research analysts, but that's actually flipped over, particularly over the last couple of years. And then our experiential group, who are probably well suited in maximizing sponsorships, or they may create experiences, bespoke experiences for clients.
Cool. I was kind of doing some reading that you guys have, you were awarded like Agency of the Year, Best Places to Work as an award. I'm guessing that's a part of your job too, is making, it a great place to be. Be curious kind of like your thoughts on that and kind of your secret sauce in keeping everybody happy.
Well, you know what? I don't know if I can keep everybody happy all the time. And I think it's interesting it was much more, I'll say predictable, let's say prior to the pandemic. And I've found more recently, and I think this is like ubiquitous depending on, regardless of market, that in the pandemic, there was no playbook for how to deal with employees or clients or whatever else was going on. And so it really just felt, I'll sort of describe it, and I don't mean to to make light of it, but it's like everyone needed a hug every day.
Yeah.
And, when you do that long enough, it creates a bit of a habit. Right. And then, of course, we went into 2021, the Great Resignation. And so we were, bending over backwards in order to get people to avoid taking the next $5,000 or multiple roles that were being thrown their way. That kind of curved off in end of 23. And in 2024, I would say that's sort of when the economy cooled. That was probably, it may have even started late 23 at that point, but 24 was most definitely, like, we saw no attrition. There was no roles. In fact, people were starting to lay off and so forth. And now this year, which has got mega mergers and cuts all over the place, concerns about AI replacing humans and so forth. We have, particularly this last 12 months, tried to be quite intentional about shifting away from what I would call, could be created as this like culture of nice, right? Where we got so used to just being really nice to everyone and to each other every day that we stopped being kind, in the sense that we weren't being direct and caring, almost having this what we'll call radical candor. I think that's Kim Scott, I think, is when you coined that, and she has her own consultancy now. The best thing you can do is actually let someone know, whether it's, again, constructive criticism or praise, right? Being specific, saying why it's important. And that has been a bit of a journey, right? It's not, you don't change a habit overnight, especially one that you created over a course of years. And that's one piece of it, because that's where I think we're finally back to a stage where people are now looking at their career, and it's not about like, hey, how are you going to get me through the pandemic? Or, who's going to pay me another 5 or 10K to do the same job? Or, hey, are you going to be doing layoffs, and do I need to just find security? To now getting back to this place where, and again, regardless of generation, people are saying like, you know what, actually, I want to like build on my skill set. I want to get to the next level. I'm going to continue to earn and progress through this career. And I think it took a little while, it took a couple of years coming out of the pandemic to say, okay, back to business. Yes, the economy is a little ridiculous. Everything costs a lot more than it did just 5 years ago. Salaries, let's admit, did not move at the same pace. Certainly it did not sit at the same percentages. And so, hey, if I'm going to make more, I'm going to be successful, and, sort of see a place for me in the future, then, I'm going to take that, my own destiny, into my own hands. And so that's another place we've been pushing, is on, I'll call it broadly, development, right? Making sure people have really great goals. So the role competencies are clear, so people know what they have to achieve, what skills they need to acquire in order to get to the next level, to make it to the next pay band, to, make more money, which is ultimately what everyone wants as part of their success. Those two things are certainly contributing to engagement. And then I'd say the third is recognition. Because, and this may be controversial, I guess, in the agency world, and there's lots to talk about, the days in the office. We currently do 2 days a week in the office. I see that hybrid as being a bit of it has some pros and cons. Few of the cons are less exposure between all levels, so senior people to juniors and vice versa. The ability to acknowledge and recognize people for a job well done on the spot, and building some of that, what I will call, that sort of in-person traction that you can't get on a video, right? You don't pass someone at the coffee machine or stop them in the hall or randomly walk and pick up lunch. When you're on videos, right? You get on video, you do your 30 minutes, get through your agenda and on to the next one. Some of that additional exposure is part of the learning process, and not having that often enough, I think, can be detrimental as well. So trying to find and replace, particularly that recognition piece, is something that we've also been working on, so that it doesn't feel fluffy. It's not just, a catch-all email, like that sort of stuff it's not the same as someone coming up, a superior or a colleague coming up and saying, like, hey, you did a really great job at this, and here's what it delivered for the client, and I just wanted to call it out, right? It's not quite the same thing. So those three elements, it's a fluid living thing, and so it's always a battle.
Were you fully remote, or were you hybrid before the pandemic, or was the hybrid thing a change after?
We had a work from anywhere policy where you could do that 1 day a week. I kid you not, Justin. I don't know if anyone did it.
Yeah.
Prior to. But the good thing about it, when we went into the pandemic, we were set up for it. So we had all we're on a Google enterprise. So we had, Google Meets and all the protocols and things set up. So it was a relatively easy transition from a tech standpoint. But yeah, now of course, employment culture has shifted so much in such a short time frame. Now the expectation of coming into the office is, I got to commute, and I got to pay for my commute, and I need dress clothes and all the things, right?
Well, you make an interesting point, because I've talked to many leaders about the transition from hybrid and in office and the differences between those. But I've actually never heard anybody say that one of the tricky parts about the hybrid work model is that you can't offer recognition. I actually have never heard that before as being a pain point, that that's actually something that employers think if they want to offer their employees more recognition, encouragement. And you don't necessarily get that when you're doing these, like you said, these quick Zoom videos where you're just kind of getting to the point and you're moving on to the next thing. So I find that really fascinating. I appreciate you sharing that with us.
No problem. So many things. I'm sure we'll know years from now. There'll be some science around it, but on the impact of just the employer-employee social contract has just changed so dramatically. And some things are good about it, and there's some things that aren't. Right? There's always a trade-off.
Yeah. As far as technology, is there anything that helps your team kind of stay connected? Do you guys kind of use Slack, or what sort of if you are going to have to connect this way, what's the best way to do it?
Well, I mentioned we're on Google Enterprise, so we use GChats and Spaces often. So larger groups, account groups, whatever, they'll be on Spaces all the time. And so we still try, so even our days in the office, we try and ask everyone to focus those on collaboration, so that don't come in here and sit in a corner and be on video calls with stuff, or just be writing. Do that on your days when you're home. When you're here, spend time with, whether it's status meetings or brainstorms or whatever else you need in order to collaborate with your colleagues. Spend that face-to-face time. Get the exposure that you might be missing on the other days.
Curious, just on a personal note, what kind of things do you like to enjoy and do outside of your workday?
Well, I have 2 adult children, so I'm often scheming for ways to spend time with them, which they're pretty good about, but I'm sure they see through. But I'm a self-proclaimed gym rat. So I go there every morning, and I got my kids into it. And so that's how I kind of con them into spending time with me, either, going for a hike, or we try mountain climbing, or parasailing, or whatever it is based on what we're doing. I also coax them into winter vacations because, being in Canada, it gets cold, as I mentioned earlier. So, going to the Caribbean before or after the Christmas is, an easy 7 days with them.
I can understand the cold weather. I actually am located in Vermont. Well, I'm used to sort of I'm not too far from you. We're roughly an hour and a half to Montreal. So I'm pretty close to that neck of the woods. So
so you'd be at least same latitude, maybe even a little further north than where I am.
Yeah, it's pretty chilly. We have some snow out here right now, and I'm not
Way
really.
better skiing. Way better skiing.
Yeah, we have some nice mountains around here. It's pretty peaceful, nice place to live. But yeah, it's I yearn for especially in February, I yearn for the tropical climates, and yeah. Cool, man. Well, I guess I'd be curious, maybe on a final note to kind of just understand a little bit if you're seeing any trends or anything that you're seeing and expecting in the coming year or two in the industry, or and how you're planning to adapt to it.
Yeah, I think there is. I mean, it's already emerging now, but I think it's going to become more so next year and maybe for a couple of years. But there's like a dual crisis kind of basically facing the industry, right? On one hand, you have this crisis of visibility. So AI, as we know, has caused paid search to have a huge paradigm shift. People are turning to chatbots instead of Google. And even when you go to Google, it's serving up an AI summary. So the sponsored links are not paying off. And when they do, they're costing a whole lot more than they used to. Alternatively, as I mentioned before, like there's no way, I mean, yes, there's some monetization happening in the LLMs, but it's not a paid model where you can just insert your brand, and it may or may not ever be, because the whole purpose of going to an LLM is to actually get an aggregation, if you will, of sort of factual information. And I think if anyone were to say like, hey, we're going to put an ad in there, I think you'd have people drop off like in droves. And no one's going to do that in this, hyper competitive market. On the other side, we have this crisis of trust, which AI is also creating, where there's so much, I'll call it AI slop on social. It is impacting influencers. It's impacting a number of the platforms where even the ads that are coming on there, people are like, is this a real ad? Or is this a fake company? I can't tell. And so I may see these really super cool shoes, but it's from some company I've never heard of. And I click through and it's not really jiving. I immediately back out and say, you know what, I'm going to go to a Nike or Adidas because I know what I'm getting. Right. And so now we're at this point where it's like, oh, I can't trust necessarily that it's going to be fed to me. So, we're already starting to see some of that consumption on social. People are still participating, don't get me wrong, but I think they're consuming less. And when they go to the AI, you may or may not be the answer. And that's a problem, right? Because a lot of the content that's out there, owned or otherwise, is maybe not optimized for the AIs to pick up anyway. And that's going to cause, as I said, what I would formally call reputation become maybe a company's most strategic asset. And it's not just reputation in an unmeasurable or esoteric form. It is, as I said, what your employee base thinks, what level of advocacy you have with them, what does your brand health look like, how are they talking about you in subreddits, how are you perpetrated in, again, sort of whether it's with analysts or other financial institutions or, even I'll call them the legacy media, but the noted authorities in media, as well as how is that correlating with your product life cycle, the sales, visits to your website, and so forth. All of those factors really correlate together. And I think that's what CEOs and CFOs are soon going to realize, that, okay, this all revolves around my reputation. If I continue to improve that in the right places, then those sales are going to head up, or my website visits or analysts are going to, catalog my stock in a better way. If it goes down, if you're in the, you have a crisis, a product recall, some other kind of issue, that will actually, cause you to head the other way. I think it's going to be critical going forward, not just, as I said, in a sense where, you're just kind of throwing out hope, but there's actually ways to measure all of those elements of your reputation, and being able to do that. And then again, leverage the opportunities you have within that is going to be super important. I think the other piece particularly on influencer, like I think we're in for a bit of a shift of people will debate between whether they're an influencer or a content creator. And both, there is certainly two roles there, but there's such a proliferation with the number of people that are coming online to be various sizes of influencer or creator. And there's, as I mentioned with that sort of AI slop, there's a lot of folks that are kind of shrinking their circle on social when they can. And I think that's going to make it tougher and tougher, particularly for that I will call it the mid group. Like I think micro influencers are going to continue to have trust. They've got a really close circle, right? That people are looking for them because they cover a niche or they're sort of trusted in that community. And then there's the big names, people I know or the like. I think it's the ones in the middle. It's like, I'm not sure if you're selling me this because someone paid you to, or is you creating any of this content that's sort of AI generated? Like, what if you're just in this for the money, I don't know that I'm in it for you. So I think there's a bit of a juxtaposition coming in that space too.
Yeah, riches will be in the niches. And reputation, that sounds like a really thing to keep in mind going forward. I appreciate that. Cool, Nick. Well, thank you so much for being on here today and having a conversation and offering value to all of our listeners. Yeah, I look forward to staying in touch with you in the future. And really appreciate your time.
Oh, it sounds great. And thanks again. Thanks again for having us.
Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.